I do appreciate people coming. I think it's a tall task for everybody. We're going to start this. We're done? We're on? Okay. So call together the meeting of the Planning Board, special meeting, April 3rd. You're going to finish up with the 14 different amendments that were passed to us. This will be our last meeting as far as discussion of these. We didn't have 45 days. In reality, I think we ended up with, 20 days in reality, maybe 30. But we will have another meeting on the 8th, I believe, and that will be where we'll go over our recommendation to the council, and we invite anybody there. And before we decide what we're going to do, I'll let people have a final comment. So that said, I'm going to turn this over. Oh, no, I'm not. How are you? Good morning. I could feel the daggers. No, you did good. You did good. Can you call the roll, please?
Stephen DeSimone. Here. Rupert Friday. Here. Thomas Callahan. Present. Dr. O'Neill.
He's absent with excuse.
Mark Brady.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have 4 members present. You have a quorum.
Thank you. At this point in time, I'm going to turn it over to the staff. All right.
Good evening. I'm Jill Sabo, Director of Planning. Tonight is our 4th and final night of discussions about the chapters and section amendments that came down. We went through this. Thank you. So we've been through this before. We know we have 45 days. These are the rules that you're required to follow. 1 vote, one referral, 1 vote. Today we're going to talk about site plan review. Oh, let me go to the schedule first. So here we are in the schedule. As you can see, we're on the last night. And we do have that special meeting, Mr. Chairman, that you mentioned on April 8th. Okay, so site plan review is the last thing on the agenda, the 4-day agenda that we have. If there's anything else that I missed, I have it as miscellaneous wrap-up. We can go over that at the end. But let's just get into it. So site plan review history. The first reference.
I'm going to interrupt. Please do not rush through this. I think it's important for everybody.
Yeah, so thank you.
Take your time.
Well, I definitely won't be rushing, but I do want to caveat everything with saying I didn't catch everything. I did my best. We're going to go over it. I'm going to tell you what I see, what I found, and then I'll tell you at the end that I know I've missed things, and I'll tell you some of the things I know that have been missed, and then I'm sure there's others, because it's just, this one is the one, as I mentioned in the beginning, that when I broke them down from chapter and section and tried to lump them into topic items, this site plan review had the most threads. It weaves in and out of everything, of multiple ordinances and chapters that they're proposing, that the council is giving you as an amendment proposal, as well as other sections and chapters that aren't referenced in the 14 amendments. So I will do my best. I'm sure there might be others here who might be able to catch some things I missed, and we can certainly, I'm providing you some information at the end. I also sent you some information today as well on this, actually on the law, which is one of the first things I want to point out. So first, staff found actually the original Muni Code in the town. It was adopted April 26, 1973. So that was over 50 years ago. This is an excerpt of that. You can see it right there. Thank you. And the staff also, as I mentioned in previous meetings, Yeoman's work in our office to do some research. But what we did find that there is a version of site plan review is permitted in every ordinance that staff reviewed since the 1970s. There's some level of site plan review in our ordinance. It was adopted in 1973, and it's been reflected in every ordinance that we were able to get our hands on. So our code predates the state enabling, which was adopted on June 17th, 1991. I did provide you a copy of that original enabling law today. Pardon me, Heidi provided that to you today. I provided it as a reference so you can see that that was, since the Zoning Enabling Act was adopted in 91, it's been in there. And what you see up here on the projector is the law, which is 452441, the general provisions. This was provided to you as part of those amendments I believe it was some footnotes in the chapters. And this is the same as what is currently in the state enabling, was the original state enabling. So I have a couple of things highlighted here. I just want to cover them because I think they're important. So what you see in the bold text right there where it says, the zoning enforcement officer agency shall immediately transmit each application received to the zoning board and a copy of each application to the planning board or commission. So that, we're going to talk about that in a little while. And then under B, where it says, shall provide that the zoning board review immediately upon receipt of the application for a variance, in the literal terms, may request that the planning board or commission or a staff report its findings and recommendations. I'm pointing this out because the referral to the planning board is enabled in this section. It's discretionary for each municipality, but it is enabled here. The town has adopted, through both the zoning ordinance and the municipal code, to exercise this discretion. So this is what you see in our municipal code. I do provide the entire code up on the projector later on, and I actually provided you a copy at your desk. I'm sorry, at your table. So this zoning, this within section 2.127 says, all petitions for change, variation, or exception. I want to point out that exception was the original language for special use permit. The language changed, but exception and special use permit are synonymous. And the zoning ordinance shall be referred to the planning board for study and recommendation. So that's right in our municipal code. So the proposed amendments, I'm going to take them one section at a time. So chapter 1099 added a statement regarding, so the original chapter 1099 added a statement regarding a municipal lien certificate. We had some of you may recall, we had a project a few years ago, and we needed to make sure everything was buttoned up. So 1099 added that language for municipal lien certificate. The proposed amendment actually, to 1099, doesn't reference the municipal lien certificate at all. It deletes a section to site plan review. So it deletes another section of that in section 18. Chapter 1117. I have to stop here for one moment. I just want to make sure we have the right slideshow.
Don't worry about it.
All right.
Are you kidding me? As I said, this is my second notebook this big. So,
You could just give us 5 minutes.
please.
Thank you. I must not have hit save on my computer.
No problem.
Thank you. Do you want to pause the
Yeah,
audio?
I'm going to recess.
Thank you.
We're going to recess for, we'll give you 10 minutes. Thank you. A couple minutes? You ready?
Yeah,
All right, folks,
I mean,
we're going to start
sure.
back up again. Let me know when we're live. We are live.
Okay.
We're going to, folks, if I could, we're going to start from the beginning. I think this is unique for us because most people don't get to see what we do or how we do things. So it's sad that we've had to have these meetings, but it's been kind of great that we can. It gives people insight. And I think this will give you really an understanding of what our role is, where it came from, and how we work, and the benefits that we have to the town, to builders, developers, landowners, as well as neighbors. So I'm going to turn that over to the staff. We're all set with roll call, right?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. I apologize to everyone. But we're up. I hit save. We're good. Okay.
We're good.
All righty. So let me just start from the beginning again. So April 26, 1973, the staff, we did a deep dive, and we found it was actually in book 1 of the municipal code, which is about, it's over 50 years old, which talks about all petitions for change, variance, exception to the zoning ordinance shall be referred to the planning board for study and recommendation. I want to point out that variance, as I mentioned a minute ago, exception is the previous word to special use permit, so they are synonymous in this instance. Okay, thank you. And this is the Zoning Enabling Act. This was adopted originally in 1991. There have been many, many, many edits since then, but this is the same. This is this is actually what's in the ordinance, in the state enabling law today. And this was also provided to you, as I mentioned a minute ago, was provided to you as a footnote in the amendments. I did read these a minute ago, but a couple of things that are probably important to point out again is that it does say that the zoning enforcement officer or agency shall immediately transmit each application to the zoning board, and a copy shall go to the planning board or commission. That's the law. And under B, it says that that an ordinance shall provide that the zoning board will review immediately upon receipt of that application for a variance, and may request that the planning board or commission report its findings and recommendations. I want to point out that referral to the planning board is enabling in this section, but it's discretionary for each municipality. The town did adopt through both its zoning ordinance and its municipal code to exercise that discretion. And there it is in our municipal code right there, under section 2.127, powers and duties. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on to the actual proposed amendments. Chapter 1099. This chapter was originally intended to update the ordinance to require a municipal lien certificate. As previously mentioned, came to the town's attention a couple of years ago that we really should be requesting municipal lien certificates for applications, and we amended our ordinance to do just that. We added a section B in chapter 18, I think it was 18.1. So that's what you see. That's what you see in the original chapter 1099. What is on the screen behind me shows the amendment that is proposed to you by the town council. So it does strike some language in A, and you can see B, which is the original amendment chapter for chapter 1099, which adds the language for the municipal lien certificate. Thank you. So section 11.1, under chapter 1099, there's an amendment to section 11.1, which is variances application. So this change actually strikes the reference to the application transmission to the planning board. This is not compliant with the law that I just mentioned a minute ago in the state law, so 4524. This strike, and I do have legal next to me in case I'm not correct, but it literally strikes that requirement which says each application shall be provided each application to the planning board. Go back. I just want to read that. Yeah. So what it specifically says is the zoning enforcement officer agency shall immediately transmit each application received to the zoning board review and a copy of each application to the planning board or commission. That's 4524-4A. So if we go to section 11.2 under chapter 1117, this changes the requirement of planning board review from the shall to a may. So it goes back to that permissive language. And this is specifically, let me just take a look. So it does refer to the powers and duties of the zoning board. I want to point this out as well. So under State Law 45-2457, administration, powers and duties of the zoning board. This empowers the zoning board to refer the matters, and this takes the discretionary language, which I mentioned a minute ago, and brings it back to permissive, brings it back to the original enabling language, which we have talked about in the past, where the Zoning Enabling Act enables municipalities to use some of their discretion when they're allowed to, and this brings it back to sort of that enabling language as opposed to the discretionary language, which is currently in our ordinance. This change also might require, so I was thinking about this, and this change might require that an application actually go to zoning as a public meeting, where the applicant would have the opportunity to attend to determine whether or not the zoning board wanted to refer the application to the planning board review. So in order to know if the zoning board wants the planning board's input, it may have to go to the zoning board as a public meeting, sort of an informational, where the applicant would have the ability and the option they should be showing up, whether they want to argue their case for or against. If the zoning board decided that it wanted the planning board's input, then that would be 3 meetings. Then it would be going to the zoning board, it would be going to the planning board, and then it would be going back to the zoning board. If no, then it would be 2 meetings with the zoning board, the public meeting, and then a month later, the public hearing. That could create additional work, and certainly additional time for staff, additional work for the zoning board, because now they're doing 2 meetings for each application, as well as additional steps and costs to the applicant. Or it's the creation of multiple public hearings at the zoning board each month that get continued. So if you skip that first step of the public meeting and you go and open a public hearing, and then at that time the zoning board decides, in fact, they do want your input, the public hearing has to stay open and continued till such time as you can put it on your agenda and you can offer them a recommendation, and then it goes back. So if the intention is to make things streamlined, I'm not sure it does that, because it can take a 2-meeting process and make it a 3-meeting process.
I'm going to interrupt right now. I'm going to ask you to kind of go through the process after you do your presentation, but right now it's a 2-meeting process.
Yes.
And what happens at the planning board is really advisory, because we don't make a decision. It goes to zoning, but we help the applicant understand what they're going to need to zoning, and it saves them time, money, frustration to do this process. So this change is actually making it more cumbersome in the long run, and could result in far more meetings than really is necessary.
Well, the planning board does a couple of things at your meetings. So you find projects complete. If they're not complete, they don't move forward. And you find them in conformance with the comprehensive plan. And then you make the recommendation. So there's actually 3 steps. The completeness and conformance, you kind of do all together. Usually it's a 1-step, it's a 1 vote for two things. But it really is completeness and conformance with the comprehensive plan. And then it's the recommendation portion. So I just want to point that out, that you have a couple of things happening with your site reviews.
So let me just ask a quick question. So under the proposed change, the zoning board would have to find it complete, and would they make the determination whether the application was complete and in conformance before they acted?
So I'm going to be honest.
Or would the staff make that determination?
So I'm going to be honest with you, Mr. Callahan, I haven't figured that part out yet. It is unclear what staff's role is. I don't believe staff can determine whether or not something is in compliance with the comprehensive plan. I believe that has to happen at a board level. And that usually happens at your level, and then the zoning board ultimately accepts it becomes a finding of fact, and the zoning board would accept your finding as the way it's written in the reports that go to the zoning board from this board. As far as the certification of completeness, that's another question I don't believe that this Section 18 site plan review addresses. And there are several other questions about whether or not staff has the authority to determine whether or not the project complies with Section 18.5, all of those standards. I don't have the answers to that. I wish I did. It's not clear.
And I presume, counsel, do you have a perspective on this one?
Just, excuse me, I mean, from experience with other towns that do it a different way than is done here.
I don't think your mic's on.
Is that better? No? Nothing?
We'll share.
Okay. He's the last guy I want to silence.
Yeah, I
by the
know,
way.
that was dangerous. Yeah, so with experience with other towns, I mean, first and foremost, I agree with Jill, it's silent to that, whether those findings are something made by staff from an administrative level, or if the application makes its way to the zoning board, and then the zoning board says that there's issues with this application. It's silent to that. With experience with other towns where they operate in that manner, that's how it normally goes, where there's an initial level with staff. Usually it's worked out with an applicant before getting to a push comes to shove situation, before the zoning board would say an incomplete application or something like that. But on its face, it's not, that circumstance is not spoken to in what's before you this evening.
But eliminating the planning board's role in that determination does not eliminate the need to have that determination made someplace before the application can be acted upon.
Well, conformance with a comprehensive plan isn't a question that is put before, say, a zoning board on a special use permit or a variance. But also it's not appropriate for staff. So again, it's silent as to that.
Are we? Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'm trying to figure out where we are, 12.1, thank you. So yes, so it strikes the reference to transmission to the planning board. This is for special use permits. I was unable to locate, and it's because I don't believe it exists, and Mr. Slitro can either confirm or correct, that there is no reference in the zoning enabling law that references, like it does for variances, the requirement for, or the discretion for an application for a special use permit to come to the planning board. However, it is in your municipal code, and it's been in your municipal code since April 26, 1973. Just realized you might not be able to hear me.
Could I just jump in just to correct myself slightly for something I just said to Mr. Callahan with his question? When it comes to variances, and Joe brought this to my attention, it's not consistency with the comp plan that the zoning board is asked to find. It's the granting of the requested variance will not alter the general character of the surrounding area or impair the intent and purpose of the zoning ordinance or the comp plan. So it's relatively the same analysis, but not exactly the question that's put before this board. I just wanted to clarify that for the record.
Okay. So we're going to move on, chapter 18. This is where things start getting a little bit muddier. So chapter 18.1, which is the requirement and purpose, a portion of the section. So the section 18.1 in the amendments that you received simply has a footnote. I just want to get there at the same time as everybody else. But section 18.1 just has a footnote reference. However, section 18.1 was already previously, under 1099, was shown to have changes to it. So a portion of the section was stricken in the amendment of chapter 1099, as you can see up there. So this is the chapter, this is the proposed amendment of 1099. I just clipped it again and put it up there. So in the red block, you can see that that's the section that's proposed to be amended in 1099. However, in 18, it's back. And not only is it back, but it's back in its old format. It's pre-municipal lien certificate. So staff is unclear whether or not the portion of that text added to the original 1099 is not shown in Section 18. It's unclear what text carries for review. Because if you take these in the chronological order that you received them, the later ordinance would carry. But if that's the case, then this version of Section 18 is an outdated version of Section 18 and is proposed to be changed under Chapter 1099. I'm going to move on. Section 18.3. So Section 18.3 strikes subsection A, reference to planning board review channeled through the planning division. I want to just talk about Section 18.3 for a minute because it is called site plan review and submission and review. But the bulk of that section talks about environmental assessments or environmental impact statements. So when you look at the strikeout, right there, it says, let me get there. It says the planning board will not consider any application for the variance for a site plan review unless it's been channeled through the planning division. However, the line just before that talks about written comments and recommendations of the review entitled entities to the planning board. So in the same section, we're referring to the planning board receiving something, and then we're striking the planning board. So not clear what's happening there. What roles the portions of the section refer to for planning board review. Okay, so in Section 18.5, Section 18.5 strikes the reference to the planning board public notice, public comment, and possible public hearing on environmental review. And it amends a reference from the planning board report preparation to the planning division. So when you see it right there, up there, you can see that it takes that planning board report, it makes a planning division report. This is something that we just mentioned, I'm not sure we have the authority to do. But it also inadvertently strikes the entire Section 18.5. That's another typo, I'm sure. And then later in the same section, actually in 18.5, it refers to the planning board as references submitting the report to the zoning board. So it's, again, just another one of those unclear changes. So at the very end, just by way of example, I'll read it to you from Section 18.5. It says, the planning board shall transmit its report to the zoning board of review to the applicant no more than 30 days after the date on which it is received for site plan EAF or EIS, which I just mentioned, and comments of reviewing entities from the planning division and certified that the application was complete. So there's that reference again to the certification of complete application. Okay, and Section 18.6, which is the zoning board review action. This one is a little bit alarming as well. It seems like a simple change, but it strikes the reference to the time frame of receiving the planning board report. Okay, but then it potentially eliminates the zoning board's authority to render a decision on the site plan. It takes out site plan and leaves application only. So this is particularly concerning to staff because site plans have been the document of record when granting dimensional variances. It's what the zoning board hangs their hat on, essentially. If it is, and this is one of the reasons why we require a Class 1 survey, because if you're asking for a side yard setback or a front yard setback or, or a lot coverage overage, that information is all displayed on a Class 1 survey, and it should be accurate to the nth degree. And if the zoning board is no longer allowed to reference or use the site plan in making a determination or a decision, it would appear that way, and that's concerning to staff. And would likely be concerning to the zoning board as well.
I'm just going to interrupt. The significance of this, and And I'll comment it later, but there's been a campaign by the town council from the second they sat down. It was almost like it was rehearsed before they were sworn in to defame and to credit this board, saying that, you know, we're sued all the time, we do things illegally, we don't do things consistent with the law, which I filed the Freedom of Information Act and found all the lawsuits for the last 10 years, and the town council, and to me, a lawsuit is when you do something illegally. And the town council has been sued numerous times. This board has never been sued in that period of time. We've had 3 appeals of decisions. And that, understand, we're asking for an exception to the law. People are coming in and saying, we know what the law says, we want it changed on our behalf. And there's a measure for that, and one of them is hardship, and people come in and plead their case. That decision can be appealed. It can be appealed by the abutter, because they don't like what the planning board did, and actually it's not the planning board, I'll get to that next, or it can be appealed by the developer. We don't make legal decisions. We render an opinion, and that opinion goes to the zoning board. The zoning board is the legal arm of this. They can be sued. They make legal decisions, and they need to hang their hat on credible evidence in order to defend the decisions that they make, because they make the decision. We just make the recommendation. And this is so poorly crafted by people who have essentially rushed to eliminate the planning board and found out legally they can't, and don't understand what the planning board does, or doesn't really care what the planning board does, or the zoning board does. And this is dangerous. And I'm sorry to interrupt, but this is some of the most dangerous stuff right here. So I just wanted to interject that. Thank you.
Thank you. All righty, so Chapter 26, Planning Board. So Chapter 26.2, I think I have a clip of it up there, right? So it eliminates the entire section of 26.2, Site Plan Review. And then it makes an edit, but, okay. So again, this is one of those typos. This is not a, just a couple of these were actually drafted from scratch, it appears, because planning division is actually 26.3. So when you're looking at your amendment chapter here, in the actual ordinance, planning division is 26.3, site plan review is 26.2, but in the proposed amendment that you have, it has already made that change of planning division under 26.2. So I just want to point that out, that at some point that should get cleared up. But it does delete the entire section, and it's omitting the site plan review process, essentially. Okay, so I did want to just bring this up because under section 26.2, the opening section says, section 26, chapter 731 of the Code of Ordinances of the Town, title, I'm sorry, the provisions of chapter 2 of the Town Code, which establish and govern planning board of the town of Narragansett, are incorporated herein. So I gave you a copy, I believe I gave you, and if I haven't, I will, a copy of Chapter 2, which is which I referenced earlier, which is that 2-127, which was which gave you the authority to do the site plan review. But there are a lot of other powers and duties in there. So I did give you a copy of that, and I put it up here. It's very long, but I just wanted, it's long in projector, but I just want to show you because it is 2 pages, so it goes through all of those things. So right there you can see I have it bolded, the zoning matters. That's what I showed you earlier in the slideshow. So then I did provide you a hard copy of that as well. Okay, so I put a blank slide up here because I wanted to just take a minute and tell you what I see, and then I'll leave it to you on where you want to go from there. So There are several other references to site plan review in the ordinance that are not addressed, which may be affected by these amendments. I'm just not sure. We haven't had time, we haven't had the ability to do due diligence. But I will tell you, site plan review is referenced in sections 4, 7, 10, 12, 17, at a minimum. And as I stated in the report that I gave to you, the general purpose, I understand site plan review, actually this has merit. I think it has merit. I think there's merit to be looking at site plan review. I think you could be looking at it and seeing if there's a way to streamline or make things smoother or whatever it might be. However, it also creates, this right now creates a situation where conformance to the comprehensive plan might not be made, where the proposed amendments appear to only partially eliminate the planning board's role in the site plan review process, where amendments appear to transfer planning board responsibilities to the planning division. I'm not sure that's possible. And as was mentioned at the town council hearing, I believe one of the council members said that this might be an effort to streamline the review process and to assist with making it easier, and I'm quoting, making it easier for additions and construction. Streamlining the ordinance, making it easy, is actually a principal use of zoning. However, this ordinance, proposed ordinance doesn't streamline the ordinance. The amendments appear to give conflicting direction from section to section. They are in conflict with each other from amendment to amendment. Amendments are made and then re-added, and then, and this, by the way, isn't just for site plan review. This is a theme throughout, as we know. Section 11.1 eliminates the state law mandate of 452441. It limits transparency. The planning board comprehensive plan compliance and certification of completeness, we don't know what's going to happen with that. And Municipal Code 2-127 has not been amended or is proposed to be amended. And that's what gives you the authority in the municipal code. And again, just for reference, it says, all petitions for change, variance, or exception to the zoning ordinance shall be referred to the planning board for study and recommendation. The planning board shall submit an advisory opinion and recommendation on all zoning matters referred to it, and any other matter referred to by the town council. Further, this process has been in place for over 50 years. I do believe a due diligence of the implications and ramifications may want to be undertaken, and if this board is so inclined to recommend to the town council to send it back to you singularly for study, then we could certainly do a due diligence, get all those loose ends cleared up, and figure out, how you would suggest to the town council to move forward.
Thank you. I have a question, and then I'm going to ask you to do something. My deduction out of all of this is the workload doesn't change. It shifts. It shifts away from 5 people who have expertise in the areas to a staff that is drowning as it is. Where are you going to get the people to do this work?
Is that rhetorical?
Absolutely. I didn't expect anything back. But the reality is the work doesn't go away. The requirements don't go away. This has to be done. I'm in favor of streamlining. I've been arguing all along that sheds and decks and maybe new garage should find a different way of doing it instead of people having to come all the way to us and then go to zoning. But the reality is there is an essential role that we play, and part of that, a big part of that, is the benefit to the proponent to come in, understand what they need, if there's anything missing, understand where the difficulties might lie in what they're trying to do, and help them through the process. We save them money. We save them time. We protect the town. We protect the neighbors. This, to me, is again, a rush from a group that's trying to eliminate the planning board, figured out legally they can't, and then figuring out how to neuter it. And you quoted one counselor, I will quote another one, and this is really, to me, the essence of this whole ball is, and I quote, I just want to go in and get a building permit and build whatever I want. And I think that's really the goal of this. My question for you is, could you please walk us through a typical application process that would come into the staff. Where does it go into? Does it go into building first? Does it go to you? And then between staff to planning board, and then from planning board to zoning board?
Sure.
Thank you.
So a typical application will come in through e-permitting. They'll file for a building permit. It goes through an internal review process through the building inspections office, building review. Then it goes to engineering for compliance with section 7.7 of the ordinance. And then it comes to our department for the environmental overlays, or sometimes we look at a couple of other things depending upon what
And
the
that-
workload is for.
That application, my understanding is, because I've pulled a number of permits, is done electronically now, for the most part. So it's not walk it through, it's done for the most part. I'm not saying everything.
Yes, so it's a little bit of a hybrid, because we are still reviewing paper copies. Not everyone has the mega screen in their
Yeah.
office. And some people just find it easier with paper plans. But yes, everyone has access at the same time, but there's, that paper does still, those two site plans do travel around from building inspections to engineering, to planning, and then back to and then essentially goes back to zoning, which is the building inspections department. If it's been determined that relief is needed, the building official will write a letter, and the applicant will be notified that they cannot pull a permit. They need to seek relief through this process. They file an application with our office, it comes to Ms. Petrone, and then they get the ball rolling. There's an application procedure. You can look that up online. I won't.
Yeah,
go
I'm
through all
not,
of that,
I'm
but-
just trying to walk
Yep,
people through the process.
absolutely. So what happens is, as the chairman sets the agenda and as time permits, we put those on our agenda. Mr. Chairman, I think what we did, we're doing 6 in April? We're doing
We did,
6
yeah.
site reviews in April?
Yeah,
Right,
I
so
wasn't gonna
this
break
board's
the news
very
to
good
you.
about
We did.
putting them on their agenda as soon as they can. There was a minute there where we weren't fully staffed, but now we are, so things are moving along swimmingly in that sense in our office. And they go to the planning board for that completeness, conformance with the comprehensive plan check, and then that recommendation. From there, there's a public hearing with the zoning board. So there's actually a time frame of which you can't really get out of, because it's 14 days before in the paper, and you have to, Ms. Petrone sends out the ad for the abutters, and there's a notification time frame. So it gets scheduled to the very next zoning board meeting, so it's a month-to-month, a back-to-back process. And then it goes to the zoning board for the final review and approval, or decision, I should say.
Thank you.
If I may.
Please.
What I would like to tell you what I see. As a staff person, I've only been here 12 and a half years, and I have sat in every position in my office save Ms. Petrone's. And I have seen applications come, and they come to the planning board, and they may be asking for the moon. They may be asking for too much. They might be asking for something that they know they want to horse trade away later. Who knows? But they are asking for something, and when it goes through the planning board, I see the planning board, I see the way that the applicant is working with the planning board, and they may not be. But oftentimes, when you only look at the vote between how the planning board recommends and the zoning board decision, you see a lot of recommendations for denial and a lot of approvals. What you don't see, what the outside person doesn't see, but the staff sees, is the change that occurs. Is oftentimes people, you may see it because they've come back to you twice. You mentioned an applicant last night, who I won't mention by name,
Right.
but an applicant who came to you twice, and then he just went to zoning, and he was singing planning board's praises at zoning, actually. But he changed his application, so oftentimes people, they might not get a positive recommendation for you, but they get the feedback, and they make that change before zoning. So when the application gets to zoning, it's not the same application that you saw. It's not. I can pull out multiple applications where they've actually supplied us the information even after they've come to you, and we've had to update our reports with the strikeout highlights, so you know that, so the zoning board knows, because when our report leaves us, it goes to you, it becomes your report. So we want to let the zoning board know that, in fact, here was the report that you put forward, but here are the changes. They have reduced their variances, they've cut down on their setbacks, they've reduced their lot coverage, whatever it might be. So that's the thing that when you're just looking at the votes, you don't see. But as a staff person, we see that fairly often. I just want to put that out there, because that's part of the process that you wouldn't, that no one else would see.
Thank you.
So couple questions for staff, and actually one was already answered. How long the current process is in place, and it seems like it's been in place since 1973. Do you know how many other towns where the planning board reviews site plans?
I can only think of a couple, 3 or 4 maybe. I believe Portsmouth, I believe East Greenwich, I believe Cranston, maybe Mr. Salitro, Little Compton. I'm not sure, you sure?
Not positive.
So,
Let me rephrase to say, other towns have chosen to use that discretion.
yeah, and I guess, so I know when the legislation passed in 2023, pretty dramatically changing the zoning code, I was at a planners roundtable, and I know a number of other towns do a different process. I think they call it a development plan review. So they were even talking about tweaking that process in response to legislation because of sort of the constraints the legislation put on the planning board review process. But I know, I've heard that, oh, Narragansett's the only town that does this, and I don't think that's true. And then I know other towns that aren't doing it this way do a different process, so it's still. And to emphasize a point that I think's been made, so the only site plans that come before planning and zoning are the proposals asking for an exception to the town zoning ordinance or a special use permit. The other permits, they go to Wayne, we don't ever see them.
No. I always joke with people if they have to come to our office, it's because they're looking for relief, essentially. They're looking for relief from the ordinance. They're unable or desirous of having something that's outside the parameters of the ordinance, and they need to come and seek permission for that.
And then the law changed in 2023 that, so it seems like there's even less need because the law changes automatically adjustments for the small lots, the substandard lots. So they don't need to come for variances for a lot of the reduced dimensions because it's automatically granted on substandard lots.
Yeah, yes, that's true. As we've talked about in earlier meetings, yes, the substandard lot provision allows, it allows you, well, now the law allows you to go to the nearest compliant zone unless you don't have a compliant zone, and then you go to the underlying zone. But yes.
So it seems to me that the proposals in front of us to expedite applications are asking to expedite applications for exceptions to the town zoning ordinance. And it seems like they're proposing to reduce transparency, the opportunity for neighbors to comment and on development proposals that aren't consistent with the town zoning laws. I wanted to share my experience on the planning board. I've been on 2 years, and much of what you just said, the first year on the planning board after we saw site plans, I went to the zoning board because I wanted to know what happened to them at the zoning board. And many times at the zoning board, the application before them was very different than the application that was before us. The significant changes that happened, and so I witnessed what you see as staff. Because this is different from the other proposals in the package, many of the other proposals in the package from town council have recent planning board decisions and findings. I thought it would be important to talk about, and this one doesn't because this was put in the code probably before there were planning boards reviewing changes to the zoning ordinance. But I thought it would be useful to talk about how I see this being not consistent with the comprehensive plan. So I brought my comprehensive plan with me. A vision for Narragansett. Narragansett's physical beauty, unique among New England coastal towns as a result of seaside residential character. This character must be protected, preserved, and enhanced for future well-being of the community. And then later in the vision, it says, the very assets that make the town such a desirable place to live and vacation have been and will continue to be threatened by inappropriate development. And then specifically, because I know we're always referring to sections. So the land use policy 2.2 speaks specifically, promote residential development that strengthens neighborhoods, respects natural resources, preserves open spaces, avoids sprawl, and reinforces community character. It seems to me that the planning board review of site plans and feedback to the applicants helps that happen. So removing that would be not consistent with the comprehensive plan. Policy CSF 2.2, provide the community with a transparent and open government. It seems like removing transparency is inconsistent with that. And then policy H2, protect the unique character of Narragansett's neighborhoods. And H2.2 specifically says, support residential infill and expansion that is sensitive to the surroundings and does not negatively impact neighborhood's character. It seems like planning board review discussion with the applicants on variances and special use permits fulfills that. So removing that, I think, would be inconsistent with the comprehensive plan.
Thank you. Tom?
So, any process that's been around for 50 years, you can look at it a couple of different ways. One is it's stood the test of time and makes sense. One is 50 years and makes sense to maybe take a look at it and change it, modify it. So from my vantage point, I mean, Mr. Chairman, you mentioned earlier, it may be prudent for this process to be tailored based on whether we're looking at decks or driveways or walkways or additions and things of that nature. But the real issue from my vantage point is when you decide you want to change it, when you perform surgery, you have the opportunity to either look at it and do amputation or use a scalpel or use a laser. And it looks like in this particular instance, what has been referred to us is essentially an amputation and not a scalpel or a laser surgery. So I can understand the need to make the change and make some of the, carve out some things that might make sense and not subjected to a full planning board review process. But what I think the council has sent to us is basically an amputation and not a scalpel or not a laser, and I got a concern about that. I am concerned that they've sent us something that is in fact proposed, in 1117, for example, it's not the proposal that they sent us, as I understand what staff has told us, is not compliant with state law. And so one of the reasons that things have been sent to us is that the council has deemed it not to be not to be compliant with state law, when in fact what they've sent us is not compliant with state law, for example, in 1117. And I'm also concerned, I have a little different take than Rupert has on transparency. I understand the need for transparency. I'm concerned about the potential impact on insulating staff from the politics of getting stuff done. So the planning board's review, if it basically goes to staff, it puts staff in the crosshairs without any buffer from, people who are looking, and developers, either individuals or developers that are looking to do stuff. I think the planning board's, again, in an appropriate role, maybe a little, not in every, like I said, deck or sidewalk or, excuse me, side driveway or something like that, may make sense. But on some of the big stuff that happens, and I've kind of watched it, I think I'm the only person sitting on this board that's also sat on the zoning board of appeals as well. The staff having the opportunity, having 5 citizens as a buffer before is an important, I think, process that needs to be taken into account. I think I'll stop there at this moment in time. I'm going to reserve the opportunity to make some further remarks a little later.
Steve?
Sure, thank you, Chair. It's a lot, like you guys said. I'm glad to hear that you guys are fully staffed now. That's great. I think that'll definitely help expedite things. Oh, you're not? I thought you just said you were.
No.
Okay, okay. Well, I hope we get there. That'll definitely help. But the comments about garages and walks and small variations, I think this does in fact target that. They can go to the zoning board of review. They don't have to come to us first. If there's a big project that's asking for too much, the zoning board of review, even if this all gets taken out, can still send it to us. Is that correct, as I understand it? Yes. So,
Yes, that's correct.
okay, so large projects that are asking for too much can, of course, be sent back here. But smaller projects, it eliminates having to come here first to then go to zoning. And a lot of the reason that things are horse traded is because people understand they're going to come see 2 boards, maybe several meetings here, maybe several meetings there, and they have to pad their applications in order to horse trade things. I don't like that. I think if they were allowed to go to zoning first, and zoning can make a determination one way or the other, or send them to us, they'd be less likely to pad their applications with nonsense. Now, that's obviously conjecture, but I think it would help. I also like your idea about having, obviously there's inconsistencies all throughout there are little holes that need to be filled, and I think that's part of why they sent this to us in the first place, is so we can talk about it and figure out, you've already identified 4 or 5 other sections that they would need to go in and make cuts and changes to make it more consistent and make sense. So I think this has been a good process, and I'm glad we're doing it. And that's what I've got for now.
Staff, you want to add anything before I open it up to the public?
No, just to Mr. DeSimone's comment. So certainly, the way it's drafted, it would bypass the planning board, but it wouldn't necessarily streamline, because it would go to the zoning board for either the public meeting to determine whether or not it comes down here, and then back for the public hearing, or it's a cumbersome project because the public hearing is open and then held open, and so now you could have, you could have a situation where you have multiple open public hearings at zoning, so they're held open from month to month until they can come back down, offer a recommendation, and go back up. I honestly don't, I'm not 100% sure how that's going to work, because it's not clear.
That's great. That's great feedback for the council. I'm sure they can solve that. It feels like the completeness could be reviewed by, I don't know. But, it seems like if it's something that the zoning officer thinks has a chance of being approved, they don't need to do a hearing to find out whether or not they should send it to us. It can go before the zoning board, and even at a public hearing, if they have to send it to us, they can send it to us. And yes, it's a pain to have several meetings open at the same time, but it really helps all the people who want to do small variances that, I know state laws made a bunch of changes, so a lot of those variances are by right now, but there are variances that people ask for that they have to come here and then there, and it takes a long time, and it's expensive. And it just doesn't actually remove site plans from applications. There still can be required by the building official. If he thinks he needs a site plan, he says you need to give me a site plan. Is that right?
It appears that the site plan could still be required, but it can't be used by the zoning board in its decision. That's the way it's written.
Is that accurate,
It's-
counsel? That's not the way I'm reading it.
Let me just show you,
Sorry.
Mr. Decision.
Yeah, this stood out to me. Maybe I would, having not drafted it, maybe I was reading by implication that it's implied that it's part of the application that the zoning board is considering. I thought, again, without being the person who put pen to paper, my thought is that it was considered as part of the application, not struck in its entirety. But that's to be seen. It's one of those question marks that's in there where we have unanswered questions.
That makes sense. That's how I saw it as well. But obviously, it's good to ask, and it'd be great to get clarification on that. So.
Just one one more question, I think, for Jill. Jill, is, in this scenario, an applicant could go directly to the zoning board. The zoning board could continue the meeting to ask the planning board for its review. So you've got an open hearing going on at the zoning board. It could take more than one meeting of the planning board to do the review. So the planning board could be going through multiple continuances as well. Is that correct? While the meeting is held open at the zoning board.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And one problem with that is you have to continue to a date certain.
Right, so at the zoning board level, you'd have to continue to a date certain, so, you know, almost assuredly, the staff would recommend 2 months to be able to allow the planning board to either get it on their docket, because your docket might be full of other things, or, you know, or to allow, especially if it's a complicated application, to allow you 2 months to look at it.
Correct, and there's no assurance that the planning board could do it in 2 months.
Right, I mean,
Right.
how, yeah.
Depending, you have your public hearing at the planning board. If it is a matter of, that draws a lot of attention of the public in terms of basically having a number of people at the public hearing that want to speak, or there's a complicated application, either because of, it's a complicated application, there's no assurance that you can set at the zoning board a date certain that's going to work, that's going to be rinsed entirely by the planning board. Is that
Yes, the zoning board does not control the planning board's schedule.
correct? Thank you.
As I stated earlier, this town council, for whatever motivation, the second they took their seat, went on a campaign to discredit, defame, and criminalize the planning board. Didn't quite understand where it was coming from until we got 14 amendments in one shot. Those amendments look like somebody's shopping list. I've had people come up and say, well, it doesn't make sense. You know, some of it's about building and then some of it's about liquor license. I said, yeah, it does make sense. Somebody sat down and went through a shopping list. I wasn't shocked that these 14 came because a counselor who's sitting on the board now told me twice before they were even sworn in that this was going to happen. The counselor told me a lot of other things, including the fact that planning board members will be replaced with builders or more appropriate people. this really, to me, encapsulates what is going forward here. And it starts to make sense as far as changing baselines in master plans. Or, I'm sorry, other states it's called a master plan, comprehensive plan. The thing to me, and I started to touch base on this, is in their rush to essentially eliminate the planning board, because I think they figured out legally they can't eliminate us, by some group that this council represents. In their lack of understanding, or they don't care to understand what we do and how we do things, this proposal does not comply with statutes in many ways. It is contradictory in many ways. It virtually eliminates transparency and the impact to neighbors and their right to protection and due process. It returns the building process back to the good old boy days of back rooms, don't worry, I got your back, I'll take care of you, you're my friend. It eliminates the purpose of the site plan review, and I will read the purpose because I think this is really essential to understand. The purpose of the site plan review process is to ensure that the Zoning Board of Review has before it sufficient information to determine whether a variance or a special use permit, those are exceptions to the law, will promote health, safety, and general welfare of the community and will conform to the intent and requirements of this ordinance. I can quote you chapter and verse of the comprehensive plan sections. I think some of it's already been carried. I'm not going to do that to you. This does not streamline the process. And while Steve is new here, I've been here for a couple of years. I went back to our agendas, and I went back 2 years. And I counted 5 proposals that came before us that had to come a second time. I'm looking at this month's, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All of these will be done in one night, and they will go on to zoning. But they will go on to zoning prepared, educated, understanding what things they might be able to work through and what maybe they might get resistance on. This board has been scolded by our legal over and over again about being too involved in people's projects. And we can't cross a line. We can't give the impression that if you give these changes, you'll get approval. But that's how much we work to assist, whether it's Jane and John Doe or if it's Builders LLC, it doesn't matter to us. We don't have the luxury of representing a person or a group's interests. We represent all the people. Changes are going to require the same, by implementing these changes, you don't change the requirements of the process of permitting something. You're just shifting that responsibility. You have 5 people who put in a lot of time on their own. We don't get paid. We're good at what we do. We're very good at what we do, and we're dedicated. This work is going to have to be picked up by people with equal backgrounds who this town is going to have to pay for, whether it's out of the building inspector's office or out of the planning office. It is not relevant which one, but the load is just going to get shifted. It's not going to change. We don't delay things. In fact, we try to expedite things. I will give you one that we've talked about a number of times where the gentleman had to come back a second time. He came, and this is 4 of the delays were exactly this. We asked him if he would like a continuance rather than getting a decision. And he accepted that. And other people have done the same thing. It allows them an opportunity to go back, regroup, and come back in. And the second meeting is totally different. But that's their choice. They can move ahead. We've had attorneys come in and flat out say, we're out of here in 3 seconds because we're going to zoning. Okay, we respect that, and we honor that. So, to me, the people that are giving the shopping list of changes, especially this, are not the builders who take pride in what they do, take pride in this town. It's the ones who want the shortcuts, who don't want to follow the law. They don't want it to be about me. I just want to go in, get a building permit, and build whatever I want. That shouldn't be what any society is based on, especially a town that has the developmental pressures that this town has. And I think it is it's irresponsible to represent this board as illegal, unethical, immoral, and it's also equally irresponsible to say that we cause delays to development. We don't. We expedite as fast as we can, responsibly. On that note, I'm going to open it up to public comment. Anybody have anything to say? Sir, come on up.
I'm learning. John Hanley, 10 Wilderness Drive. So I didn't have much to say tonight because I tried looking at this and I really got confused by all this stuff. It appears everybody is confused. But two things. One, listen to you gentlemen, basically. It shows how much you know about what's going on and what's sort of trying to be happening in this town, and I appreciate you saying that in the ways that you can. And to a previous comment that with all this confusion that some stuff might go against state law, there's stuff stricken out, shouldn't be stricken out, the comment was, well, this is why possibly the council sent it to us to work this out. Well, I disagree with that wholeheartedly because the council didn't ask for any of your real opinions. If you read the motion, it's these are the suggested changes. I'll tell you, when I used to work, because I'm now retired, if I put a work product like this in, I'd have my ass handed to me. That's all I got on that. I do have one quick question.
Go ahead.
I think you mentioned that at the wrap-up on Tuesday, people could speak again.
Yeah.
I just had a very few, I'll call them closing comments. If they're not appropriate now, I'll hold them and hopefully I can make it Tuesday, or it's 2 sentences.
Go ahead.
All right, if you're gonna let me go.
And
I appreciate
if you want to reiterate them on Tuesday, you're welcome to do
Well,
so.
maybe I will, depends on how Monday goes. So my last comments are, I just want to thank you for doing this. You can see the work that goes into it, and you guys and the people that work for the town, unbelievable. So thank you. The other thing I want to say is, I hope that you include in your response to the council the fact that in 5 meetings here, there was virtually no one that spoke in support of any of this. And finally, may I request, as part of the recommendation, that you include the suggestion that residents initiate section 1-4-7 of the town charter. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes.
Hello, Jill Lawler, Sarasota Avenue. Mr. Brady, so Tuesday night, you're going to be making the recommendations, or you're going to be taking your vote on this, on everything we've talked about for the last 2 weeks?
I just want to clear something because I do not want to get into procedural legal. We will not be taking a vote. And our recommendation is limited. It was well-defined, narrowly defined as to what our response will be. It's either we can support it or we don't support it.
Okay, so that will happen on a scheduled meeting on Tuesday night.
Tuesday night.
So when I walked in tonight, Mr. Ferrandi alerted me to the fact that the town council agenda was put out a little while ago this evening. And on Monday night, they have a motion to schedule a public hearing on everything we're talking about right now. In the suggested action for the public hearing, it says that they, on March 3rd, the town council meeting, they attach the zoning ordinance and refer them to the planning board for review. These proposals were to create consistency between town law and state law. And the proposals are also seek to add a streamlined process. Then the following line. The planning board has already had several special meetings to review the proposals. The public hearing is scheduled for May 5th. So it looks like they have no intention of meeting with you, discussing the proposals, or asking for your feedback. Customarily, what happens when something's referred to the planning board, I know you know this, is there's a motion to receive and place on file the planning board recommendations. They don't want them.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak? Sir?
Good evening. I'm Mike DeLuca. My address is 21 Middlebridge Road. I have a written statement that I'd like to read from. I'll let you know in advance that some of my comments are going to reflect some of the comments of the board members themselves and some of the presentation given by Ms. Sabo. And I want everyone to know that I didn't speak with any of you in advance when I did this, so it's interesting that we came to some common conclusions or raised common questions. So I'm going to read this. It's 2.5 pages, just a little longer than my last one, Mr.
Relax, we've got
Chairman.
time.
So in regard to site plan review, we're reviewing chapters 1099, 1117, and proposed revisions to sections 18 and 26 tonight. Combined, these 4 amendments propose to remove the planning board responsibilities to receive, process, and comment on site plans related to applications for variance and special use permit. I always like to give you a little bit of historical. Jill did a phenomenal job. I didn't know site plan review went back to 1973. Very good work. I knew that it was in place at the time that the town instituted the overlay district regulations that I mentioned in a previous meeting here. Section 18 established the Community Development Department as the processor of all applications for the zoning board review. In most communities, that is the responsibility handled by the zoning officer and staff. But in doing this, the town council here authorized the planning board to provide review of all site plans, issue certificates of completeness, and determine completeness and compliance with the comprehensive plan in advance of going to the zoning board of review for hearing. The town council at the time wanted to be certain that all the environmental issues were considered in relation to the environmental overlays, which were better addressed by the planning board than the zoning board. This preceded, and Ms. Sabo also mentioned this, the state law, which was passed in 1991, which declared that planning boards or staff may issue a statement of concern if referred by the zoning board. We had already been conducting the process whereby the planning board initiates the review for several years prior. Since 1991, when the current zoning act went into effect, the town has retained this process to ensure an efficient and complete review of all zoning applications for variance relief or special use permit. It was established that the dimensional relief should be based on the least relief necessary, a standard which was in place until just last year, which in more than half the cases involved wetlands or coastal resource overlays. And I believe community development staff would have data to back that up. This concern for the environment was so prevalent in 1987. Remember, that was when the overlays were created. That's when there was a moratorium in place to draft the overlays. That the town council added a section specifically requiring environmental impact analysis be conducted and submitted to the planning division for review when deemed necessary by staff. And there are two layers. There's environmental assessment, which is kind of a short-form version, and then there's a second version, which is a full-blown environmental impact statement. I'm happy to say that in my tenure, previously working for this town, we never did see the necessity to get a full environmental impact statement, but it is enabled. I lost my place. Give me a moment. Then, the then existing process was retained because it would take an extra month to have the applicant present before the zoning board, be referred to planning board for advisory, and then return to zoning board for completion of the hearing. So it was seen as an efficiency decision. The final provision of Section 18 delineates 16 factors for the planning board to consider in its analysis, which should be addressed to the zoning board in their recommendation. These standards have been the benchmark for all planning board reviews for many years and are addressed in virtually every staff report that goes to the board, and I can say that I've witnessed the board actually applying those standards for several years. So while the general law, Section 452441, does not require that all zoning applications be reviewed by the planning board, it's clear to me why the town council in 1987 directed the initial review of zoning applications to go to planning board. With the environmental coordinator staff housed in the community development office, and the environmental database created just a year earlier by Searle & Searle, a consultant who had done an analysis of wetland soil qualities and water table, it made sense to engage that staff to consider the environmental impacts and to report on them. The planning board was, and still is, better suited to assess the impacts that maybe extend beyond the boundaries of an individual property. I'd like you all to note that in Chapter 1099, as proposed for revision, it will eliminate the stated purpose of site plan review process, which will result in calling into question the need for any site plans to be submitted at all. That's a problem. In Chapter 1117, as proposed, it will move all applications for zoning relief from the planning division to the zoning enforcement officer. That will require a wholesale addition of work for the building inspections office. As you know, the building inspector is the zoning officer. It will remove the necessity of zoning applications going directly to planning board, and that will result in an added month in the timeline of processing, which was already mentioned before, making it a three-step process. The same will happen for special use permit applications. This is not adding efficiency. The new draft ordinance language under Section 18.1. This proposal will remove the requirement for site plan reviews to be channeled through the planning staff, but does not remove the responsibility of the planning board to certify completeness of the applications. Ms. Sabo showed the paragraph above that line, and I'm telling you what is in the paragraph below, which is that the planning board still has to certify completeness. Additionally, this proposal will remove the public notice requirement for the planning board to issue, allowing for public comment on the site plan. It also changes the reporting process to come from the planning staff and not the planning board, which conflicts with the authority granted to the zoning board by state law, allowing them to request planning board comment. I would also add, one thing that is being kind of forgotten here is that in Galilee, we have a special set of regulations there. And I'm not sure if anyone on this board has had to review a Galilee plan yet, but in Galilee, when someone requests any zoning relief at all, or a special use permit, both boards have to approve it. It's not a advisory, as you say quite often, Mr. Chairman. When you get a Galilee report application, you share the responsibility for approval with the zoning board. And it's essential that both boards agree, because then it can get dicey. Coming up, I'm on my last page. I want to point out, and Ms. Sabo also pointed out in her final comments, that there are other chapters in this ordinance that have not been addressed. And one that you missed, well, because it doesn't mention site plan directly, but section 14 is not addressed in any of these amendments. It's important because it sets forth the provisions for establishing an applicant's vested rights to a hearing. Vested rights, as you know, is a very powerful tool. And it requires that the planning board certification of completeness happens before the hearing can be held by the zoning board. This element will be left hanging in the air and will run counter to the proposed regulations as revised. So in closing, that's just one example. Ms. Sabo provided you with several others. I would remind the board that the site plan review process applies to subdivisions of land also, and therefore carries a broader legitimacy. So we can't just write site plan review out completely. When you look in the subdivision regulations, which apparently the proposers of these bills have not, there's a whole reference to site plan review happening for subdivision and land development plans. So we need to have the site plan review process in the zoning ordinance so that it can be applied to land development plans and subdivisions also. The proposed amendments will splinter the site plan process, removing key elements and leaving others with no foundation. This will result in confusing regulations that may or may not be enforceable. Site plan review is a very powerful tool and has worked very well for over 50 years. The proposed changes incorporated within the referenced ordinances will put the zoning ordinance and those carried out into disarray. If changes are desired that will make the zoning process more efficient, approving these ordinances will do the exact opposite. Again, I suggest the planning board recommend the town council defer these actions or deny them outright and direct the town manager and the staff to initiate a study to determine what procedures can be made more efficient and ask the staff to provide draft language that is internally consistent, complete, defendable, and reasonable. Thank you. I have a copy here.
Chairman, may I ask?
Any questions?
So, Mr. DeLuca, is it fair to say that during the years, I know you haven't been weren't involved in 1973, but in the years you were involved in planning in the town, I think there were periods of building boom. And
Yeah.
Did this process interfere with the building boom?
No. What the process did was make a lot of work for staff because the agendas for these boards got pretty lengthy, but we tried to keep up with them as best we could. As you all know, extra meetings have been scheduled, not just meetings like this, but extra meetings had been scheduled through the years to address backlogs of projects. So staff always tried to stay as close to up-to-date as possible. When the building boom happens, there's more work for everyone.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions? No. Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, sir, in the back. You have one for Mr. DeLuca? Okay. Then ask. Can you give us a moment, sir?
Yeah.
Go ahead, please.
So if I were on the town council and I were paying attention to the hearings that have taken place, and particularly tonight where there's been an identification of additional amendments that would be necessary to affect the changes that the council would require, they're looking to do, I would have to draft additional language. That additional language would then be subject to a referral back to the planning board.
Yeah, so the general rule is that when it's a minor tweak to a statute, or, excuse me, proposed ordinance, that's okay. You don't have to repost and go through the whole process. But if it's substantive in nature, which it appears what we're discussing tonight would be substantive in nature with a number of tweaks, it would have to go through the process again of reposting, re-referral, and the like.
So, the council, I'm just trying to think about process-wise, in order to get done what they wanted to get done, if they were to get it done, or what they proposed to do here, let me just say, what if they were to effect what they proposed to do, they could not modify their current proposals that's scheduled for a public hearing on May 5th, without going through this process again.
It couldn't be a significant modification that deviated
Okay.
significantly.
Thank you.
In the same vein, with all the inconsistencies, contradictions, gaps, we've been accused of being sued all the time. Legally, how exposed are the zoning board and the planning board based on the, I hate to use the word willy-nilly because it cheapens the whole situation, but the nature of these contradictions, gaps?
I think Mr. DeLuca's comment a moment ago was well taken by me personally, where you have enforcement issues, you have contradictions in proposed ordinances, and it creates ambiguity. That's always concerning.
Thank you. My second question is to legal or to staff. What people don't realize is when we get proposals, there is a clock that starts ticking. And, we're talking about, a proposal going into zoning and then zoning asking go back to planning and whatever. And, one of our colleagues, Steve, said, well, that's not a problem. First of all, that request for a continuance has to be okayed by the applicant. It is just not something, if we get to the point where it reaches the deadline, it's up to the applicant whether or not they want to continue. It's not up to the boards. Now, no, I'll save that question. Thank you. I'll save the rest of it. Thank you. Sir, can you? That's why I withdrew, because you're sitting here patiently. You look hungry.
Thank you. It's funny. One of my last calls as a firefighter, I had 7 people in the water, and I stepped back and I calmed down. I come up here, and I got to remember to do the same thing, Thank you. Thank you. I came here to these meetings over the last couple of weeks to get educated. I was clear with everyone. I'm in the process of building. I've been transparent with a lot that I own. But one of the things I'm learning is you're not that intimidating. You have been very supportive. Maybe I'm naive and this is early in the process, but something you said, Mr. Chair, that's sticking with me is if it's for the greater good, then I shouldn't really be intimidated by this process. When you hear the planning board, the zoning board, and it's been 20 years since I built the house from scratch. I've done several renovations. But I just want to let you know we're talking about some of the things that people have to go through. I don't feel as intimidated, and I just wanted to let you know that. Again, I may be naive, I may have to jump through hoops, and I'm fine with that. But one of the things I've learned, too, through the process, and I was speaking to Mr. DeLuca, I pulled my plans this past week. I had a pretty larger home that I changed the whole design plan on. I think that it's more feasible and possible for a family to get involved in a much smaller property. I can tell you that some of the things I've heard here has led me to make that decision. So I just want to let you know that I feel supported. I don't feel intimidated. I'll wrap up my other things I just wanted to mention next week. But I just want to thank you and let you know that Jill has been supportive. You guys have made me feel a little bit more comfortable about the whole process, so thank you.
Great, thank you. What's that? Oh, I'm sorry. Joe Volpe. Young lady?
Carol Spaziano, 12 Renston Road. I appreciate all the work that all of you have done. I've got a good education here. I do have a question, and I don't know if it's relevant or not, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Is the town council have any legal ramifications if they don't follow the comprehensive plan?
Counsel?
That's, they're subject to appeal. Simple as that.
Okay, thank you.
Sir?
Ron Catanzaro, 17 Atlantic. As a resident who also volunteers their time for the town, I want to thank you guys because a lot of people don't really understand how much time it does take, and as you mentioned, there's no compensation for it. We do it because we love the town and we want the town to be better. I serve on the finance committee myself, so thank you for that. And I also wanted to mention, in the lines of what Mr. Volpe said, was that when I renovated my house, it was a 125-year-old house. It was just newly deemed a historic district. And at the time, it was Mr. DeLuca who was in charge with me there and walked me through the whole thing. And then when we got to the end and we got done, I found out that I was the first one to go through it. So, but I say
They waited
that-
until the end to tell you that.
He did, yeah. But Mike and I still are friends today through the process. I learned a lot also about what the town did, but I learned a lot about the house too, because I had to research the house. And for a 125-year-old house, I found out that I'm the fourth family to own the house in 125 years. And so the process, while people want to demonize it, if you go in with an open mind and you work through it, you're going to come out better on the other end. And I think you guys have demonstrated that through the years and everything that I've heard today. So once again, thank you to you and the staff.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak? Sir?
Evening, Planning Board, excuse me, Stephen Ferrandi, 44 Sylvan. I'd also like to thank everyone and the staff, and especially the job that they did. Very difficult with a lot of the amendments you received and picking through it all and finding out what was mandatory, what was not, what was added, what was not congruent with everything else. So it's a very, very difficult lift. But you guys all took the time to look at it, and the town's going to be benefited by all of this. No matter which way it goes, for the diligence that you did. And also, you know, this is in the end, there'll be another, and I wish you luck in all your deliberations, you know, before the final hearing comes out. And I just want to make sure that the town council gives the planning board time, or a representative of the planning board member, to explain all this at the public hearing. It looks like it's going to be on May 5th at this point. So thank you all, appreciate it.
And by the way, our decision will be an open meeting, so on the 8th. Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, seeing no one else. Rupert, got anything you want to close with?
Thank you, Chair. Just sort of my closing thoughts. I think this proposes to expedite applications for exceptions to town zoning laws. I don't believe it will expedite applications. I think it will reduce transparency on proposals, development proposals that are not consistent with the town's zoning laws. And I think, as has been discussed, I think there's the opportunity for tweaking the site review, the process through the planning board and zoning board for sheds and small amounts of pavement. But I think what's in front of us it's not consistent with the comprehensive plan, and I don't think it makes good sense.
Thank you. Tom?
I think my recommendation to the town council would be to reconsider what they've sent to us. I'm sure it was not their intention to send us something that's inconsistent with state law, but somehow they have. And I also think that, again, there are clearly places where the process could be better. I don't think you'd find anybody on this board that would disagree with that. But the notion of taking a meat cleaver to this instead of a more surgical, strategic, thoughtful, reflective approach is simply calls into question just about everything that they proposed here. So I can't support this in the way that it is right now.
Steve?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, you're right. I can't disagree. I wish this was done differently, better, let's say. About this one particular one, though, that we're on, I am in favor of streamlining the process. I know you don't agree with me that it's streamlining it, but if you can go and get an approval at the Zoning Board of Review, I don't think you need to come here. And that's all I got.
I disagree with that last statement. I think we've all said that if we can find ways to streamline, we should. I've argued all along that I don't think sheds and garages and driveways and things like that nature need to come through the process. I think it can be handled by staff. I've voiced my opinions on this. I used a hatchet instead of a meat cleaver to what is being done here. Could you, trying to stay away from national politics. I don't believe this was done to expedite. I think this was done to get around, to avoid, to be able to get a permit and build whatever I want. I think this runs throughout all of these. These are not by accident. As I said, I was told by a counselor twice before they even sat in their chairs that this was all going to happen. This was decided upon ahead of time. The fact that it's so sloppy and they had that much time really speaks to them and where they're coming from. But I think I've voiced my concerns, I've voiced my opinion on this, and I'll leave it at that. Staff, do you want to add anything to this?
No, not at the time.
Okay, counsel? Okay. That said, anybody else have anything they want to add to this? Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Do I have a seconded? No? No, no, sorry.
I rescind my motion.
Thank you.
We're really struggling when Doc's not here.
Yeah, Doug's the gatekeeper.
All right, so I want to just take this minute. I just want to take a minute.
Well, I asked you if you had anything more.
Oh, I thought you meant on site plan review. My apologies. All right, so the next steps. I just quickly want to go over the next steps. You've seen this. I've beaten you over the head with it for the last 4 days. But it is the consistency with the comprehensive plan, and it is the purposes of zoning. I have provided each of you a copy of that. I've provided you a copy of the law as it reads, as it refers right down. I've also provided you a copy of section 21.1 of our zoning ordinance, which is the review criteria in which of which our ordinance refers. So please take a look at all of that. And as Mr. Friday actually already did, he made some references to the comprehensive plan earlier. We will come back on Tuesday. I will have a draft for you to review. That's it.
That's it. All right, do I have a motion?
Motion to adjourn?
Seconded? Second. All right, that's non-debatable. All those in favor? Ayes have it.